kids, it's the Biston Fly here, hope you're well. Now I'm out and about on a wet and miserable day, as often is the case when I come out for these test rides, on a bike I've wanted to ride for a long time. This is the Triumph Trophy, and the reason why I want to ride it for a long time is because it's Triumph's answer, if you like, to the BMW R1200 RT, which I rode a few months back, and I was very impressed by. So stick around, stay tuned, and I'll tell you how I think the Triumph Trophy compares to the RT. So the Triumph Trophy is, of course, one of these full-dress tourers, much like things like the RT and the Yamaha FJR, the Kawasaki 1400, GTR 1400, I think it is. They're all of this type with massive fairings and big engines and so on, and they're super comfortable to ride. I mean, the first thing that strikes you about the Trophy when you're on board is actually how upright you are on it. It feels like you're riding an armchair, it literally does. But your feet are fairly well tucked up underneath you, so even though it is a gargantuan bike when you look at it, actually when you're riding it, it doesn't feel that big, because you feel like you're tucked up on a fairly small bike. Now the Trophy, of course, has a 1215cc triple engine, the triple being the thing that Triumph are so good at. I love triple engines, they've just got that lack of vibration, yet still got a bit of character about them. They always sound lovely. Although, having said that, on this bike, you can hardly hear the engine at all. It's buzzing away there. If anything, it sounds like a car underneath me. Let's just see what she's like before I get to the speed limit. Yeah, she's got plenty to go. There's no lack of power on this beast. What I love about these full dress tourers are these low level mirrors. They just seem to be in a more logical place than mirrors that are up here on stalks on a bike. I don't know why that is. I mean, you're actually looking out underneath your arms, but they do give you a surprisingly good view behind, as opposed to tucking your arms in like I have to on other bikes. This one you just sort of lift your arm up and then you've got a lovely view behind. That's excellent. Wind protection on this bike, superb. Obviously massive fairing that sort of protects you, but also you've got this big old screen that's electrically adjustable, so there you go, you can bring her up or you can lower her right the way down. And the short time I've been riding it, I've discovered about halfway up seems about right, just keeps the wind off your face. Right, what I really need to do is turn round and head back to a bit of faster road, because this sort of bike, although it's nice to ride here, really deserves to be on a slightly faster road, a bit of an A road, dual carriageway or motorway, just to see what she's really like for the purpose that she was designed. So let's head back to a more major road and see how she fares then. I'm hoping you can see okay. It's a pretty horrible day out here to be testing a bike. Quite a bit of rain about, so there's a few droplets on the lens, so I apologise about that. Hopefully you get the gist though. Now before I get to the bigger road, unfortunately I've got to negotiate a town, so it's quite a good little test to see what she's like in traffic. Not obviously a bike that you're going to be wanting to do a lot of filtering on, just as much as anything because it's as wide as a house, but certainly when you're moving it feels nimble enough, no problem at all when you're moving. But I have noticed when I've stopped at junctions, you do feel the weight on your legs. You wouldn't want this thing to get over much of a sort of critical angle before you kind of lost it, so I'm going to be very careful with her when I come up to junctions and so on. The engine in this, of course, is the same as the one that Triumph used in the Explorer, so it's shaft drive, so very direct feel to it. And no issues having to look after a chain, which is nice. Seat feels very comfortable. It's quite a wide old bike, but as you would imagine, you could probably ride this for hours on end with absolutely no fatigue. It's a very comfortable riding position. Your arms feel quite wide and quite far back compared to what I'm used to. The engine sounds amazing. It actually reminds me of this, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it reminds me of driving an old Mini. It has a similar sort of note to the engine. I've not driven this big triple before on any bike, so it's a new noise to me. It's not unpleasant. It's certainly very quiet. There's a lot of plastic fairing around the engine itself, which I guess makes it quite quiet for the rider. as well as easier to clean, of course. Right, for those of you that don't know Hemel Hempstead, this is a nightmare roundabout. It's a roundabout made up of roundabouts. It's impossible to be in the right lane on this. You just got to hope that everybody else knows where they're going and knows that all the rules of indication kind of go out the window a bit here. And this is a quiet time. If you do this in rush hour, you're into a bit of a nightmare. But to be fair, through traffic, no issue at all. As I say, a little bit, to be honest, frightened to do any serious filtering on it because of the width of the bike, or certainly it feels like it's wide, although in practice it's probably no wider than, say, my GS with its panniers fitted. But given it's not a bike I'm uber familiar with, I don't want to take any chances. Height-wise, the bike seems pretty low. It's I don't know what the figures are for the seat height, but in common with a lot of this style of bike, and I guess because they are weighty, you are quite low, so you can get your feet firmly on the ground. And there's no issue. Just feeling this now, I'm almost flat-footed on either side. Not quite, but almost. But it's certainly, I don't feel like I'm going to drop it. Let's hope that remains the case. Right, so let's get this bike onto its natural habitat, which is fast dual carriageways and motorways. So let's see how she does. All clear. Well, with the windscreen at this setting, there's no or very limited buffeting. It's a slight sort of high frequency buffeting on my top of my helmet. Let's see if I can get rid of that by adjusting the screen a little bit. Okay, with the screen right up, I'm completely in a bubble of clean air. But unfortunately, I'm looking through the screen. I don't much like that, so I would just drop that down a little bit, and then you can start to feel the buffet again. So it's a matter of adjusting it to your individual preference. But right now, there's no buffet. I'm in a sort of clear bubble. But then I'm only 5'8". I imagine if you're a tall person, even with it on its uppermost setting, you'd probably find a bit of wind spilling over the top there. Deceptively fast, this bike. Just took a glance at the speedo there and saw I was just creeping up to 90, so I've slowed her right down again, back to more reasonable speeds. And she really is comfortable at this sort of speed, which of course is what these bikes are designed for. Great view out of those low slug mirrors. Good awareness of what's around you. Really like that about these sorts of bikes. This is the SE model, so it comes equipped with all the bells and whistles you can ask for. Of course, it's got ABS and traction control and engine modes. I won't go through all the details. It's got heated grips. It's got the whole lot. Unlike the BMW, I think the engine modes on this you have to change when she's stationary. Not a big deal, but a minor annoyance. This again has got the radio pack fitted. Got a bit of a thing about having a radio on a bike, I must admit. Something I think is very essential, but nonetheless it's got a radio if you want a bit of on-bike entertainment. It's a very, very easy bike to ride, I have to say. I mean, I've been on it 20 minutes or so. I've just sort of got some fuel on it and ridden it around some local roads and now on these faster roads. And I'm already feeling very comfortable. It feels very familiar. I don't know why. It just does. I'm not sure how confident I'll be on it with a pillion though, just because of its weight. Fine when you're moving, feels a bit weighty at standstill compared to the BMW RT that I rode recently. I guess that's down to the fact that the centre of gravity on this bike is a little bit higher than the BMW, which of course has the boxer engine, so it carries its weight low, which I rather like. So if you're in the market for a bike like this, it's probably worth riding both and just seeing how you get on with that. Right, let's get past this bit of traffic and then we'll find somewhere to stop and do a bit of a walk around the bike. The presentation on the instrument panel here, or dashboard I suppose you could even call it, on this bike is very clear. Big old speedo that's easy to read and a nice rev counter, and then of course the LCD in the middle with all the essential information. Too much to go through on a short first impressions review like this, but you name it, it's got it. One of the things that maybe I don't like so much about the bike is the way the controls are. There's so many controls here on the handlebars. They're quite a stretch to reach to some of these. Luckily these are the radio controls, which I don't think I would use very much, but not particularly ergonomic in that respect. Come on Peugeot, you're going to pull over for me? Okay, I'll just sit over here then. You're pulling over, fine. Yeah, it's a bit like driving a Starship. Very stable, very planted feel about the bike, as you'd expect with something of this size and weight and the purpose for which it was built. Definite Grand Tourer. Lovely smooth engine. The triple is beautiful. Triumph really know how to make those. Surprisingly agile machine, actually. When you want to, she hustles through the corners very nicely. Right, let's get rid of this windscreen a bit so I can see what I'm doing. Here comes the wind blast. It's actually quite smooth when you've got it low, so not that turbulent. Obviously that depends on the sort of crash helmet and so on you're wearing, so it may vary for you. But I for one far prefer looking over the screen rather than through it. Right, let's find somewhere to stop. Okay, so here she is then, the Triumph Trophy SE, Triumph's answer to the BMW R1200 RT, and superficially it does look very similar, doesn't it? You can see you know, what they were thinking of when they did it. I mean, the bulbous front end looks similar. Maybe a bit more fairing, a bit more covering of the engine, so easy to clean, which is nice. Massive panniers, which is great, and of course you've got the shaft drive as well, which I love because it just means you don't have to worry about any chain maintenance. All good stuff. And again, when you just look at the sort of layout of the dash, generally the way the mirrors are, the speakers, etc., again looks very, very familiar, doesn't it, to the BMW? So really it is. I mean, it's an unashamed copy, really, isn't it, on Triumph's part, I guess. But there we go. But pretty successful attempt, I'd say. Very smooth engine, that lovely 1215cc triple. Very nice indeed. I think if I were in the market for one of these bikes, I'd have to ride them both back to back, just to kind of make my mind up, because they do feel very, very similar to ride. They're much better when you're riding them than they look in terms of size. They don't actually feel big at all when you're riding them. The Trophy is no different in that respect. Lovely smooth engine on this though. The engine is definitely nicer on this in terms of its smoothness. I'm not sure it feels quite as fast and as punchy as the BMW, but certainly it's lovely and smooth, and for the you know, there's no lack of power, and for the intended purpose of this machine, which is cruising on motorways and so on, absolutely perfect. So just to put some numbers on the Trophy then, it's just looking at my notes, it's 132 bhp, this engine. And the dry weight is 295 kilograms, so stick a tank full of petrol on that and you're looking at 1/3 of a ton. So she's a big old heavy beast. Certainly I think the heaviest bike I've ever ridden, although it doesn't, as I've said, it doesn't feel heavy when you're on the move. The engine puts out 120 newton meters of torque. Again, you can ride it quite lazily. You can have it in a fairly high gear at a low speed, and it doesn't labour at all, so it's a really nice engine in that respect. Bike has a 10,000 mile service interval, which is just fantastic for a bike of this type. So relatively cheap to run, or should be. And in terms of price, this is the SE model, which I assume stands for special equipment, has all the bells and whistles, and this is I think £13,200 on the road. And as I mentioned before, it's got all the bells and whistles in terms of electronics. It's got the semi-active suspension, it's got Bluetooth integration, I think, for the radio, it's got tyre pressure monitoring, all that stuff, so no lack of toys to play with. Alright, enough chat, let's ride her back then and just sum up what we think of the Triumph Trophy SE. big old lump to get off the side stand. Right, nothing around. Interestingly, I see when you start the machine up, the screen goes to a preset level, so there may well be a way of defeating that, but it looks like you have to adjust that each time you get on, which is no problem. Just slightly annoying that bike manufacturers do that sometimes with some of the electronic settings. Okay, to sum up then, I've been on the bike for, you know, not very long, so it's very much a first impressions type review. But the engine, very nice indeed, nice and smooth and creamy delivery from the triple. Shaft drive, so no troubles with the chain maintenance and so on. Wind, weather protection rather, absolutely fantastic. It's like sitting in a still bubble here. You can ride visor open, there we go, and no problem at all. I love the mirrors. The clutch is relatively heavy, but not so you'd notice. It's kind of medium, I'd say. The gearbox is nice and smooth. There's no clunkiness in there, which I have suffered before on some previous Triumphs I've owned. The gearbox is lovely and smooth. Seat height feels quite low, although my feet aren't flat on the ground at 5'8", but they're not far off it. You don't feel unstable at all when you stop. And power-wise, she's got oodles of it. Lovely on the faster roads that we did earlier. So overall, as I say, very, very close one to call when you're comparing this against something like the BMW R1200 RT. I think ride them both, and it probably just comes down to what you like the look of more, and whether you're more of a BMW or a Triumph fanboy. For me, I'm both, so a bit of a dilemma. So there we have it. That's my first impressions type review of the Triumph Trophy. I hope that's been of some interest to you, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Until then, this has been the Missenden Flyer. Cheerio.